Good afternoon. My name is Evan Cutts. I'm the content editor for Color Magazine, and we are back with another Color Conversations. Today, we are with Naeemah Elias, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with her. For those of you who do not know, Color Conversations is a conversation series where we engage influential leaders of color on all topics relating to diversity, inclusion, their lives, and anything in terms of empowerment, best practices, and success strategies. So we are so excited to have Naeemah today, and I'm very happy to tell you a little bit about her. Naeemah is currently working as the managing director in the talent marketplace for State Street Corporation, recently appointed to the role. She is responsible for driving internal mobility at State Street and is pivoting from a decade in the business continuity with a variety of roles, including business continuity planner, director, compliance oversight, and risk oversight. Prior to joining State Street in 2010, Naeemah spent years as a professional actress, and she toured with the American Repertory Theater. She helped build the Zeitgeist Stage Company and performed in numerous local productions. So really just a Renaissance woman out here. It's so exciting to have you here, and glad to have you share a little bit about yourself with our audience. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is an exciting opportunity. So I guess in addition to the things that you talked about, I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago in a sort of challenging urban environment. I've got five siblings, and I think, the big deal is that, we sort of came out of that environment, and all of us sort of went on to do really unique and interesting things, right? And so it's a testament to, my parents and the work that they did in their focus on parenting. As I said, grew up on the south side of Chicago, came out to Boston to go to Harvard. And so that was a
Incredible.
little bit of culture shock, right? Definitely a very different experience than any I'd had until that time. And so I spent some years at Harvard. I took some time off and worked on Capitol Hill in the middle of my college experience to just try to, do something to give back, do something that mattered. It felt like grades and how I did on my essay got to be too important, and everybody was sort of stressing out over things
Mm-hmm.
that didn't have the right weight, right? And so sort of reorganizing my values and restructuring what was important to me. And so had a really amazing opportunity to play in that space for a little while on Capitol Hill. Um, Through all of my undergrad and elementary school and high school and all of those years, I spent a lot of time doing theater. It was my safe space, my happy space. And so after I graduated, I spent a year and a half touring with the American Repertory Theater as a puppeteer, actually. And and then did some work, actual acting, speaking roles, and that kind of thing for a number of years. And then went on to be a mom. Through all of this, as I said, I grew up in a poor family, in a poor community. I was never in a position that I think a lot of my friends were of, crashing on couches and having my mom pay my rent and, just sort of like, oh, I need an extra check. I need an extra check. Like that was never an option for me. I always had to work because I made a priority of being able to give back to my mom immediately when I was able to do so. And so starting in college, I worked in various different office jobs for years. And while I was acting at night, I was working in offices during the day. So except for the year and a half that I was touring, I would say I've worked in an office since I was 17 years old. So in
Okay.
2010, I would say, a colleague who I had hired at a startup some years before reached out to me about an opportunity at State Street, and he said, "We're looking for a house mom. We have a small house of super introverts, extremely intelligent researchers, and we need someone to coordinate that space, to manage that space, and to help interface between that office and our main organization." And so I took that role, and that was my entree into the finance space, into business continuity, and into the State Street world at large. And in the last decade, I've sort of played around again, as you mentioned, in the continuity space in lots of different roles. And at the same time, I've been a public speaker. I have been training people on how to be more comfortable speaking in front of audiences. I've trained people on how to be clear, how to be concise, how to find your voice, how to show your passion, all of those kinds of things. And I think that's sort of the greatest value that I've added in the years that I have spent at State Street.
Wow. So very, very full resume. There's
Yeah.
so many key touching points that you've landed on there. So, with such a diverse, resume, diverse experiences, could you talk about a little bit of the traits or transferable skills that you had as a former actress, as a former puppeteer working on Capitol Hill, and how that's applied to your current career in business continuity and financial services?
Absolutely. So I learned how to kind of lobby and navigate lots and lots and lots of different types of audiences on Capitol Hill. So as a teenager, I'm showing up saying, I want to speak to your education aide, or I want to speak to the representative, and let's get down and dirty and talk about things that really matter. I know you've got other meetings, you've got other stuff going on, but let's talk about this. And, at a young age, being able to step into the room with very powerful people and convince them to value what I value, because it was important, right? And I was young and I didn't know any better. But what that meant later was, as I got older, I never approached things from a perspective of, oh, that person is more senior than me, I need to give deference. And I've gotten feedback about that from managers, right? Like, you're not reverenced. And I'm like, well, do you need that from me? Is that part of the expectation, right? And so I think that was really an important aspect, early on. And then I thought everyone could speak. I think because I've been in front of audiences since I was maybe 8 years old, I think I assumed that that was a skill that everyone had. And when I joined State Street in 2010 and I was working with this group of introverts, I knew that there was value in teaching public speaking and working with that particular group. But my assumption was it was just because they were introverts, and that we had to figure out how we could overcome the challenges of standing in front of a room full of people when your desire is to be by yourself, and not that public speaking was a skill that everyone needed to learn, and that it's something that is a fear for most people, and that it wasn't just that I needed to teach the introverts, but that there was value in teaching everyone. So over the years, I've expanded my training throughout the bank, and I've trained over 3,000 colleagues in the last decade on public speaking, executive presence, and those kinds of things. And so the skills that I learned as an actress around speaking and around really using your voice and using the emotion and the language to convince the audience, to compel the room, to keep everybody with you. Those are skills that everyone needs to learn. And if you do them really well, then it makes you a much more powerful salesperson. It makes you a much more powerful, executive. All of the different levels benefit from being better with speaking.
Wow. Yeah, there's something that is, pretty universal about that, right? And about the value of that and the application to connect with other people on that level. That's really powerful. So yeah, it's really cool to hear that you're spreading that knowledge and that experience as far as you can. Like 3,000 colleagues, like that's such an impact,
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for that. And I'm curious, what advice you could give to some folks who are looking to make these sort of career transitions, who are trying to, compel, other people to take them on in a new role and a new journey in their careers?
So I think one of the first things that I say to my young people when they say, okay, I'm thinking about whether it's time for me to move or not. Like, how do I make this decision? What do I do? And so the question I say you need to ask yourself is, what do I want next, right? What is it my promotion? Is it more money? Is it different responsibility, right? Like, what is the thing that I want, that I want most in this moment? And if what I'm delivering in this role is more important than the promotion or the salary increase, then I can ask, but I don't need to compel anyone to do anything differently. Whether I get the raise or not is not as essential in this moment if I'm really truly driven to continue to deliver value in what I'm doing right now. When I reach the point where I feel like the value that I'm adding overshadows the compensation that I'm getting for that, and the compensation or the promotion becomes more important than what I'm doing day to day, then it's time to look. Then it's time to move. So that's when you step into the conversations where you go to your manager and you say, hey, I love what I'm doing. I want to grow in this space. How do I grow in this space? My goal is long-term to get to this level and to have this type of responsibility, whether it's I want to manage people, whether it's I want to develop products. What is the thing that you want in your long-term? And if you share that with your management and your leadership above your management, then they can think about how do we make sure that we get you there, right? So, okay, this is what you want to do. Let's put together a checklist. Let's think about the steps. What training do you need? What exposure do you need? How do we get you in front of the right people so that we can make that possible as soon as we can, right? And if you feel like the conversations that you're having with your leadership and are not getting you to where you want to be, if you feel like the timeline is too long or they're not responsive or they don't see you in the same way that you see yourself, then it's time to start having conversations about whether you're in the right place. Do I need to move to a different function? Do I need to move to a different department? Do I need to move to a different company? But the first goal really is to think about how can I expand on where I am and what I'm doing? And then to think about whether, if that's not possible, then how do I move out of this space and into a space where I can add value and be grateful and be growing and be compensated, right? That compensation is really important. It's really important. And I think that, so thinking about all of those things together and asking those questions of yourself. And then once you've asked those questions, put it out there into the universe, talk to people, and make sure that everyone is on that journey with you. And you're growing together and you're not trying to grow on your own, because I can only get so far on my own steam. I need a sponsor. I need a mentor. I need leadership who are in positions that are more senior than I am, who can not only coach me and help me to develop, but can also speak to their peers who are in those senior rooms and say, hey, I think Naeemah would be great for this opportunity, or I think we need to bring Naeemah into the room to talk about these things because she's going to add value in this space. So decide what you want and then cultivate the people around you to help you to get to that place.
Incredible. Thank you. That's really insightful. There are a lot of gems in there. And it makes me, I'm curious, what was your experience like, working with that group of introverts, right? How did you find what sort of value you wanted to add? How did you, I'm asking, how did you meet your goals, right, within that group, making that transition there? What were some of the steps you followed, or just, your story of success there?
Sure. So I think early on, I didn't want a job. I wanted a gig, right? I didn't want a career. I wasn't looking for something that was going to take my time and my energy. Every role I took was focused on, I'm going to be here for you from 9 to 5 and I'm going to give my all. But at 5 o'clock, I'm going to sprint out of here, grab a sandwich and be at the theater by 5:30. And I'm going to be unavailable through the night. And I might get 4 hours of sleep between now and when you see me again, but I'm going to come back and give my all. And so I wasn't interested in roles that required more of me than I could give in that window. And so I sought roles that lived in that space. And then when I decided it was time to start to grow a little bit, when my kids started to get a little bit older and, I wanted to be able to provide more opportunities for them, then I started kind of looking around. But at that point, I realized that I had really sort of changed focus about every 1.5 to 2 years. And sometimes it was, I had a new baby, I get a new job. Sometimes it was, I'm moving to a new city, I get a new job. But the cadence was about 18 months to 2 years. So with that in mind, I realized that I had fallen into this cycle where I can step into a new space. I'm going to look around and think about how I can add value and transform the space. I'm going to execute on that. And when we get to a point where we're more efficient and we don't need so much people power to achieve what we're trying to achieve, I get bored. And then it's time for me to go. And so in the beginning of my career, that meant changing companies frequently. Right. But since I joined State Street, I met a lot of kindred spirits who move in the same way. And so I've been able to move around the bank around that same cadence and have new opportunities and work with new teams and build new efficiencies. And in talking to my managers, I think maybe it was 2014 or 2013, that I had a conversation with a hiring manager who said to me, normally I wouldn't have this conversation with somebody until they'd been working with me for a couple of years, but looking at your resume, you're clearly not a person who sits still. So how do I know if I hire you that you're actually going to stick around to finish what I asked you to do? I said, well, if you look at my resume, you can see in my accomplishments that I actually succeeded in doing what I was hired to do. I don't necessarily stick around much longer than that, but what you need from me, you will get from me before I decide that it's time to move on to something else. And when that happens, you will actually be looking for new things for me to do because you're going to want me to do the same work, add the same value on new projects that I added on this one. And I was absolutely right. And he was excited and ready to move me on when the time came. And so I think really being open and communicating about this is who I am and this is what I do. When I hire people, I tell them, I'm not a lifer and I don't expect you to be a lifer. I want you to learn. I want you to grow. I want you to master what it is that I hired you to do. And then I want you to take over my job. Learn how to do my job and get me ready to leave. Because if your timeline is the same as mine, then that's a built-in promotion because I'm going to leave and there will be a vacuum for you to fill. And I've hired people who didn't believe me, but a number of my young people have come in and shown themselves to be capable. And when I leave, they get to step into my shoes. And so I create opportunities every time I leave to go and do something else. And so I think that communication is really important. I think thinking about succession planning is incredibly important. And even if it's not about grooming someone within your team, being aware of friends and colleagues who are open to new opportunities, who you think would be great stepping into the role that you're in, is a great way of leaving your role and making sure your manager knows that you were taking care of them the whole time, that you didn't just think about yourself, but you had them on your mind as you were planning your exit strategy.
Okay, wow. I'm thinking about a few of the things you had said there, and communication comes through as a very clear through line. So does this idea of empowerment really through uplifting, right? And giving folks the skills they need to take on the role because, you're going to be, looking to apply and add value to another arena. So I'm really, really excited to have you as a panelist for the upcoming Women of Color Leadership and Empowerment Conference because your business practice and philosophy is exactly what we're looking to share with our audiences. So for those who aren't aware, yes, next Wednesday on September 23rd, we're going to have the 10th anniversary of the Women of Color Leadership and Empowerment Conference. It's going to be virtual and it's going to be awesome. Naeemah is going to be on the panel with a number of other heavy hitters and diversity leaders. So it's going to be really, really exciting. And with that in mind, I would like to ask if you could just, tell us a little bit about a breakthrough that you've had somewhere along your journey, which has been very varied in terms of career. But we would really love to know because that's our theme for 2020. So whether on Capitol Hill or on the stage or at State Street, tell us a little bit about a significant breakthrough moment for you.
Sure. So this one was actually surprising for me. I worked in, among other things, one of my university roles was working in the alumni office. And our job was to plan commencement and all of the reunion events every year. So Harvard has, every 5 years you come back for a reunion. So we've got thousands and thousands of alumni on campus at any time, and there are committees that plan every reunion. And so in 97, it's huge, right? So in 97, after maybe a year and a half of working on this team and supporting this team, or 2 years, my manager came to me one day and she said, grab your coat, we're going to a meeting. And I said, okay. And she hands me a binder, an enormous binder. And she says, this is your class. I'm like, okay. And so I was like, I don't understand that. And she's like, come on, get in the car with me. We got to go. And so we got in the car and she said, this is the class of 1927. This is their 70th reunion. And you are going to plan it. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm going to what? And she says, you're going to plan their reunion. And so I'm taking you to a committee meeting right now to meet the chair and the other folks who are working on this reunion. They're all 89, 90, and 91. And they need somebody to corral them and to organize their events. They're going to ask you lots of questions. And I said, but I'm not going to have any answers. And she said, that doesn't matter. You just need to let them know you're going to get the answer. You need to make sure that they have confidence when you walk out of the room that you have it under control. I'm like, Okay.
Okay.
So this is a huge vote of confidence on so many levels. Okay.
Yeah.
And to give you perspective, some weeks later, I was at a meeting with these gentlemen, and they say, you know, where's that that young gal? You know, and I'm just like, that young gal that we used to see. And I said, you know, Diane. And it's like, yeah, that young gal. Like, you know, where is she? Diane was not a young gal. Diane was a grown woman. And
Oh
they
my.
looked at her as that young gal. And so here I am, a maybe 19-year-old Black woman, girl, undergrad, and I'm given the responsibility of being in charge of a group of 89 to 93-year-old white male Harvard alums. And
Stressful.
it was such a powerful experience for me in trust and faith, right? Diane had been running this organization for 13 years. She was a powerhouse. When she finally retired, it took 3 people to replace her. And Diane came to me and said, here, Naeemah, I believe in you. I'm not even going to give you time to prep. I'm taking you into the room with me. You got this. And it was such a leap of faith in my perspective, right? Now, she knew I was capable. She knew what I could do, and she absolutely believed in me. But I had to learn to believe in myself pretty quickly to be able to step in and to do that. And so, you know, I look at this as sort of a pivotal moment, as a breakthrough moment in my life, because it was one of the first times, and it happened many times after that, but it was one of the first times that someone just came to me and said, I'm going to give you this thing. And it's completely different than anything you've done before. And you don't necessarily have any experience doing it, but I think you can do it. And so I'm going to put my faith in you. I'm going to put my reputation on the line. I'm going to take the risk and jump and assume that you can handle it. And having other people make those kinds of assumptions about me very quickly led me to make those same kinds of assumptions about myself. And so I've changed careers, and I've moved from city to city, and I've done all sorts of things that people look at as being sort of high risk behaviors. You know, who takes 3 kids and moves across the country when they're, you know, little ones, and that kind of thing, right? Like, people don't do that. People establish themselves, they stay put. And I think a lot of the risks that I've taken in my life, or perceived risks, I've taken because of people like Diane, who believed in me early on in my career, and who sort of just pushed and said, go, do it. Jump first and figure it out on the way down. And so that was, you know, that was a powerful moment for me. And, you know, and it continues to be, I'll say, a pivotal moment in my life and in my career, and something that I am, you know, ultimately grateful for.
Yeah, I can see why. I mean, having that much faith really is so powerful and can really catapult someone to new leaps and bounds. So yeah, thank you. And with that in mind, you know, this year has been one that has been historic and challenging and risky. And there are a lot of folks, a lot of women of color who've seen a number of personal and professional changes, you know, with everything from COVID-19 and beyond, with the Black Lives Matter movement for sure. So, you know, I'd like to ask you what advice you could offer to those folks who are trying to navigate these turbulent times.
So the first thing is, it's important to know your risk threshold. You don't have to leap today. There's so many things happening. There's so many moving parts, and you have to know your risk threshold. I would say, you know, right now, if you have children and you're sort of wading through academic waters for elementary school and middle school and those kinds of things, this might be a really challenging time for you to think about changing companies while you are homeschooling and you know, and navigating COVID. Like, that's just, it's a lot to manage. And so I think understanding your risk threshold and making sure that you are making choices and doing things that fit within your safe space, right? The next piece would be, I feel like I lost you. Am I still with you?
I'm still here.
Okay,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
computer got weird for a second. Sorry.
No worries.
So understanding your risk threshold in this climate, I think, is the first thing that's really important. The next is, if it is time for you to make a move, what kind of move makes sense for you today? I think changing companies right now could be really challenging, but it could also be a really amazing time to do it. A lot of companies are talking about their diversity metrics, and they're looking at how they're not doing well in this space. They're looking for us.
Yeah.
Right? They're out there trying to figure out, how do we find really talented people of color to fill out our roles? We know they're out there. And so they're looking for us. And I think that, right now, if you are in a position where moving is possible for you, then you should absolutely look around and think about, who are those companies that are trying to change the way they do business? We're trying to expand opportunities for people who look a little bit different from the ones that they have traditionally provided opportunities to, right? And so really just figuring out that space for you. Am I ready to move to a new company? And then beyond that, what does changing companies entail? Does it mean that I can work from home full time? Great. That's fantastic, right? Right now I'm working from home full time. I haven't been into the office since March. Okay. Does it mean that I have to travel? Does my risk threshold at this moment allow for me to get on airplanes? For me, the answer would be no. For you, the answer may be yes. And so really thinking about, what does moving into a new role entail? Do I have the capacity for that in this moment, in this climate? What kinds of risks am I willing to take? And then with all of those questions, you should be looking. You should always be looking. You should always put feelers out there, do interviews, have networking conversations, really get to know what the marketplace looks like. Because if you make some really great connections today and you're not ready to move today, those connections are still going to be in place 6 months from now, a year from now. And when you are in the position where you're ready to move, it's a lot less work to make a call and say, hey, I just wanted to follow up with you. I think I'm ready, than it is to start navigating relationships when you're ready to start looking. So thinking about your network, making sure you're building it, making sure you're expanding and talking to people and building those relationships in the industry where you want to play, in the companies where you want to play, and really making sure that people know who you are, so that when the time comes for you to make the decision, you can just make the decision and you're not starting from scratch. Because when you decide you're ready to move, it usually takes 6 or 8 months to be able to get from here to there. And the more of that work you can do now, the better prepared you are, and you can shorten that horizon, that time horizon on the other side.
Definitely, right? Getting ahead of the curve, that makes a lot of sense. And it makes me wonder, with so many people in corporate America, moving towards the virtual model and working from home, what has networking looked like for you, since COVID and working from home in March? How has that changed or evolved for you?
So I have to admit, I've done a lot less networking since I've been home. In the beginning, I think that, everybody immediately sort of jumped into the Zoom culture, and there was this sort of constant video chatting. And, my brother had a daily Zoom chat going for family and friends. And, every afternoon it would sort of pop up and I'm just like, I'm cooking, and, and other friends, there were, Zoom drinks and Zoom coffee and there were all of these gatherings. And for me, I think that quickly became overwhelming. Like, that wasn't kind of how I wanted to navigate the world. And at the same time, I have 3 children, 11, 13, and 15, and I'm at home trying to help them to get through the school year, right? With the sort of constant changing expectations with the school. And so I think that my networking dropped to about 0, right? In February and March, I was having coffee a few times a week with people. I would have drinks after work a few times a week with people. I'd have a couple of dinner meetings. Like, I was regularly meeting with people 6 or 8 times a week. I'd be meeting with someone. And it went from 6 or 8 times a week quickly to 0.
Yeah.
And then when we started having discussions about diversity, I would say I activated my network. I started talking to my senior leader friends about how they were thinking about diversity. what are we getting right? What are we getting wrong? And how do you think we can be doing it better? And, to a person, their question for me was, what do you think we should be doing? What do you recommend for how we should be doing this better? And that was what sort of led me into the new role that I'm stepping into, was really thinking about how can we do better as an organization when we think about diversity in terms of hiring, mobility, and promotion and that kind of thing. And so now I think I have conversations, but they tend to be much more intentional. They're targeted. Okay. And I'm available, I think, for my young people, but they're not reaching out to me as much as they used to, which at this moment is fine, right? Because again, I have limited capacity, for that. I think face-to-face is important. And so right now that means Zoom and WebEx and that kind of thing. And so I think wherever possible, you want to be able to have that type of, eye contact connection with a person. And even if it has to be through a screen, definitely. I think that's better than just a phone call. And so I absolutely recommend that you use some form of video conference whenever possible. But I do think that, it's important to continue the networking and to try to get as much eye contact as you can get.
Okay. You mentioned, the sort of overwhelming aspects of Zoom, especially at the onset of this whole shebang. And I want to ask, if you have any strategies regarding, work-life balance, or how to, make space for yourself so that you're not getting, flooded or exhausted from the constant stream of Zoom meetings and that sort of evolution in networking culture.
Yeah. Say no. Absolutely.
Say no. Easy.
Say no. Yeah. Right. So this was something I had to learn, right? Like in the beginning of my career, when people were like, oh, Naeemah, this is fantastic. You can do this. Will you do this? Will you do this? It was always yes, yes, yes. Absolutely. I want to prove myself. I want to show that I'm capable. I want to add value. I want to be able to do everything that I can in every possible way to give myself to the world. Right. And then I got to the point where I realized that in my estimation, I was failing. Right? I wasn't showing up in the way that I would like to show up. I was tired. I was missing things. I was late for things. I didn't feel like I was delivering the quality that I would like to deliver when I say yes to something. And that was spread out across all the things. And so it wasn't even like I was doing a great job of prioritizing and saying, I'm going to do really well on this aspect, this thing that I've committed to, and maybe the other things will get less of me. No, everything was suffering, and my kids, right? And so I'm working too many hours, and I'm networking too many hours, and I'm giving here and I'm giving there, and it got to be too much. And so I had to learn how to say no, so it was the opposite of, I think it's Shonda Rhimes who's got the power of yes. For me, it was the power of no, and really sort of pushing back. And so I pivoted immediately from yes to everything to no to everything. And it was a sharp turn. Right. But what happened was I would say, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. But let me introduce you to so-and-so. This person would actually be a really great resource. It would be a great opportunity for them. And I think they'll add value for you. So I started creating opportunities for people around me when people asked me for things. And then when they pushed really hard, when I had an occasional person who was just like, I really, really, really want you to do this, then I would figure out how I can contribute to your cause without taking a leadership role in your organization, right? Call me when you need, I have a couple of friends who will laugh when they hear me say this. Call me if you need me to speak. Call me if you need a moderator, a presenter, a panelist. Call me if you need someone to show up for one-off events. Don't ask me to organize something. Don't ask me to sit on a committee. Call me when you need me to show up for a thing. And I'm going to show up and I'm going to do that thing for you. But I'm not going to commit to ongoing support of anything because I don't want to become, again, that person who says they're going to show up and who doesn't. So you have to know your boundaries. You have to know what you're capable of actually delivering. You have to figure out how you can pivot opportunities to other people whenever you can do that, and then figure out what is the thing that you can do. For me, it's speaking. So I'm going to show up and I'm going to speak if you ask me to show up and speak. But if you ask me to organize the entire event, I'm probably not going to show up for that. you
Okay.
know? And so, yeah, so figuring out your boundaries, showing up for what you can show up for, and just say no. Yeah.
Yeah, just some really serious gems there. Keeping your boundaries is
Yeah.
really important in this day and age. I know a lot of folks who have transitioned into the, remote working model and found themselves working 12-hour days because they feel like they're
Mm-hmm.
always on call. So yeah, learning to say no, to set those boundaries, but
Mm-hmm.
still add value in the ways that work for you
That's great.
is some really keen advice. Thank you. And I also want to bring up our final question before I turn it to you to share any exciting news or happenings that you have that you want our audience to know about. But one last question is, if you could leave a message in a bottle or a time capsule for the next generation of women of color, what would you say to inspire them?
So it's funny. My daughter would say, keep swimming, keep swimming, keep swimming. And she was saying that
Good
yesterday.
advice.
That's her advice to the world, right? But I think that's powerful, right? I think don't worry, right? Don't worry. And it's going to work out. And maybe it's not going to work out the way you intended or the way you thought it should, but that's not necessarily the way that it's supposed to go, right? I think that there are a lot of forces at play. You are not the only element in any situation. And so do your best, show up, don't worry. And when it's time to walk away, walk away.
Powerful, succinct. Thank you so very much, Naeemah. As I mentioned, if there's anything that you would like to share with our audience, shout outs, thank yous, or news and events, any speaking engagements that you may have coming up, aside from the Women of Color Conference next Wednesday, feel free to let us know where we can find you on social media as well if you'd like to share. The floor is yours.
No, so I'm only pretending to be on social media. I haven't cultivated a sort of huge public presence, and so no sort of major events is something that I talk about, but haven't really dug into yet. I will say one of the questions that Akila and I talked about a little bit before was, or Camila, apologies, was the idea of a person that inspires me. And
Yes.
and I think that, I'd love to just kind of close out with that question, if you don't mind.
Oh, by all means. Yeah, tell us all about who
I don't want to
inspires
talk about
you.
me. And so I just, it was something that I really thought about, and my answer is cliche, and I want to talk about my mom for a moment. Right.
Go
And
right
so
ahead.
my mother grew up an only child of a single mother. And she had a very sort of profound sense of self, right? She was the center of the world, and there was nobody who could challenge that, right? And she went on to have 6 children. And as an adult, I sort of look back, and as a teenager, I always sort of felt bad for her. I'm just like, Mom has no idea what's happening in the house ever, because we're always all over. Like, how do you go from being an only to having 6 children? Like, my poor mom, right? But for us to grow up in a community where there were drug houses within, multiple drug houses within 2 blocks of my home, gang activity and teenage pregnancy were commonplace. And the expectation was that your daughters would have children before they finished high school, and that your sons would have a prison record before they finished high school. And that my mother and my father were able to raise 6 children in this environment with no drug activity, no prison time, and no teenage pregnancies is unfathomable. And I think about what we have been able to go on and do in our lives, college degrees, multiple companies, published authors, finance, technology, operations, like the things that we are doing and the things that we have been able to accomplish are all due to my mother and my father, and what their goals were, their focus and their commitment to education and to becoming greater. And I think about, people ask me about my parenting style. It's like, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I learned from my mother. I'm just trying to copy what my mom did as much as I possibly can, and not to stray too far from that. And so I just, I want to make sure that it does not, that we don't end without me having the opportunity to say, what an amazing influence she has been in my life, and what an inspiration she has been every step of the way. Each time I step out into a new adventure, I can look at an example that she set for me and think about how she did it before I did, she did it better than I did, and I just want to grow up to be like her.
That's so touching.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and for all that you shared with us on this edition of Color Conversations. Beyond inspiring and educational, really heartfelt and earnest. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Naeemah, and I'm thrilled to have you on the panel next Wednesday for the Women of Color Conference. And I'm sure our audience is going to be as thrilled to engage and learn from you. So thank you so very much, Naeemah.
And thank you. I appreciate the
Until
opportunity.
next time.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay. That was great. It's still recording, we can trim, so this little section.